What if the most powerful religious institution on earth possessed a technology so profound it could rewrite history itself? It's a story the Vatican has never officially confirmed, it has never fully managed to bury. Instead, it functioned like a celestial television, capable of tuning into the residual energy of past events and replaying them on a screen. This is the Vatican necropolis, an ancient city of the dead buried 5 levels beneath the current floor of the church. In a stunning discovery, researchers found the remains of a medieval church built directly beneath the floor of the modern-day St. Peter's Basilica. Pope John Paul I, known as the Smiling Pope, died suddenly just 33 days after being elected to the throne of St. Peter. These questions may have placed him in mortal danger. At the time, one of the most powerful figures in the Holy See's finances was Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the American-born head of the Vatican Bank. Under his leadership, the bank became entangled in a web of accusations involving organized crime and massive, unexplained loans. A central figure in these scandals was Roberto Calvi, an Italian banker known as God's banker due to his close ties to the Vatican. Calvi was the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, an Italian bank whose collapse would later send shockwaves through the global financial world, resulting in losses of over $3 billion. Calvi himself was a member of P2, a clandestine Masonic lodge accused of manipulating politics and finance in Italy. In 1982, his body was found hanging from Blackfriars Bridge in London. Though his death was officially ruled a suicide, suspicions of assassination have never gone away. The theory is that Pope John Paul I had discovered the extent of the corruption and was planning a complete purge of the Vatican's financial network, including the removal of Archbishop Marcinkus. This would have threatened powerful interests, from mafia figures to secretive political groups. Many believe he was poisoned to prevent this from happening. Without an autopsy and with the Vatican tightly controlling the flow of information, the truth may never be known. But it remains one of the great unanswered questions of the 20th century. Was it a natural death? Or had the Smiling Pope opened the door that powerful men were willing to kill to keep shut? In his short time as pontiff, his humility and warmth had already captured the hearts of millions. But his abrupt passing opened a Pandora's box of questions, suspicions, and conspiracy theories that have never been satisfactorily answered. The official cause of death was reported as a heart attack, but the initial reports were riddled with contradictions. Some Vatican officials claimed he was found sitting up in bed with documents in his hand, while others insisted he was discovered on the floor. To compound the confusion, the Vatican refused to allow an official autopsy, a decision that has fueled speculation for decades. John Paul I was widely seen as a reform-minded leader. While he had not yet announced any official plans, it is widely believed he was preparing to confront one of the darkest and most corrupt corners of Vatican affairs, the Vatican Bank. Known formally as the Institute for Works of Religion, the bank had long been suspected of being a hub for financial scandals, money laundering, and shady investments stretching back decades. This suggests that long before Michelangelo designed his famous dome, the site was already a sacred center for Christian worship for centuries. The grand basilica we see today is, in truth, only the uppermost layer of a spiritual legacy built over to millennia. At the very heart of this entire complex lies a humble chamber, a simple grave, that the Vatican firmly believes contains the mortal remains of St. Peter, the Apostle Jesus chose to lead his church and who is regarded as the first pope. While the claim remains a subject of debate among some scholars, it underscores the profound significance of this underground city to the Catholic faith. Today, the Vatican necropolis is more than a relic. It is a living monument to how religion, power, and history were built, layer by layer, stone by stone. It is a reminder that beneath the sacred light and grand architecture of the church above, a silent, dark world still endures, holding untold stories that are still waiting to be discovered. Its discovery has unveiled a complex, layered history that reveals the very foundations upon which the Catholic Church was built. The site was unearthed during excavations in the 1940s, revealing a sprawling burial ground from the height of the Roman Empire in the 1st century AD. The lowest and oldest levels of the necropolis contain the tombs of pagan Romans, individuals who lived and died before the message of Christianity had taken root in the empire. Their final resting places tell a story of ancient Roman beliefs about the afterlife. But as archaeologists dug higher, they uncovered another layer of history from a critical transitional period around the 5th century. Here, the tombs began to show a fascinating blend of pagan and Christian iconography. Crosses were found placed beside traditional Roman symbols, a silent testament to a time when the spiritual worlds coexisted and slowly converged. As the ancient pagan faith gave way to the rise of Christianity, he alleged that the device could intercept the visual and auditory waves that humanity has emitted for centuries, which he believed remained imprinted on the fabric of the universe. Ernetti claimed to have personally used this machine to witness some of history's most pivotal moments. He said he had watched the final speech of the great Roman orator Cicero, observed the founding of the Roman Empire, and even stood witness to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But his most shocking assertion was that he had viewed the single most important event in Christian history, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. He didn't just see it. He claimed to have captured a photograph of Christ's face during his final moments, an image that, if real, would be the most sacred and revolutionary artifact in existence. However, the image was never authenticated, and many critics later suggested it was merely a reproduction of an existing wood carving. No one outside of Ernetti's alleged circle ever saw the chronovisor, and the Vatican has never produced any evidence to prove its existence. Despite the lack of proof, the story persists, fueled by the sheer gravity of its implications. If real, the chronovisor would be a tool of unimaginable power, capable of validating or destroying religious doctrine, revealing political secrets, and fundamentally altering humanity's understanding of its own past. Skeptics argue Ernetti was a brilliant but imaginative man who concocted the story for attention. But believers counter that if such a dangerous and paradigm-shattering device were ever created, the Vatican, with its centuries of experience in keeping secrets, would be the only institution capable of keeping it hidden from the world. This is the legend of the chronovisor, a device that some believe is the Vatican's most closely guarded secret. The tale originates with Father Pellegrino Ernetti, an Italian Benedictine priest who was not only a respected scholar of ancient music, but also a trained physicist and an exorcist. In the 1960s, Father Ernetti made a stunning claim. He was part of a clandestine team of elite scientists and clergy operating under the Vatican's patronage, who had successfully constructed a functional time viewer. According to Ernetti, the chronovisor did not allow for physical travel through time. Deep beneath the magnificent dome and gilded altars of St. Peter's Basilica, a different world exists, a place of profound silence and shadow, lost to time for centuries. What the necropolis reveals is more than just archaeological debris. It tells a story of transformation, faith, and the very ground upon which power was constructed. In September of 1978, the Catholic world was shaken by an event unprecedented in the modern history of the papacy. According to researchers and journalists who have investigated the matter, the new pope had begun asking difficult questions about the Banquets operations and the powerful figures who ran it. Deep within the fortified walls of Vatican City lies a vault of knowledge so vast and so restricted that it has fueled speculation for centuries. Until recently, it was known by a name far more evocative of its mystique, the Vatican Secret Archive. While it is now technically open to scholars, gaining access is another matter entirely. The application process is notoriously rigid and highly selective. For millions of believers, this long linen cloth is nothing less than the authentic burial shroud of Jesus Christ. Using high-intensity image analysis, she asserted that she could make out faint traces of text written on the shroud's surface. This is known as the phantom time hypothesis, an idea so radical it would mean our current calendar is wrong and the year isn't 2025, but closer to 1732. When Pope Gregory XIII reformed the calendar in 1582, he corrected for centuries of drift by removing 10 days. Illig contended that if over 1,500 years had truly passed since the Julian calendar's introduction, the correction should have been 13 days. The 10-day gap, he argues, suggests that roughly 300 years of time had never actually occurred. Second, he highlights what he calls a suspicious lack of clear archaeological evidence from the 7th to the 10th centuries across much of Europe, arguing that there should be far more surviving buildings and artifacts. Mainstream historians, however, have overwhelmingly rejected the phantom time hypothesis. They argue that the calendar discrepancies are easily explained by known calculation methods, and that there is ample archaeological evidence from the period. More importantly, they point to corroborating histories from other civilizations. Events in Europe during the Phantom period align perfectly with records from the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, and Tang Dynasty China. For Illig's theory to be true, nearly every major culture on Earth would have had to participate in a synchronized historical fraud, a scenario most scholars consider impossible. And yet, The phantom time hypothesis continues to circulate, not because it's believed to be true, but because it raises a deeply unsettling question. If a small group with enough power could alter history itself, how would the rest of us ever know it had happened? The theory was introduced in the 1990s by a German historian named Herbert Illig. He argued that a vast conspiracy was orchestrated around the turn of the first millennium by three powerful figures: Pope Sylvester II, Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, and Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII. Their alleged motive? To alter the timeline so they could place themselves at the symbolic and highly anticipated year 1000 AD, a moment they wanted to be at the center of. To do this, Illig claims they fabricated 3 centuries of history, inserting the entire period between 614 and 911 AD into the historical record. This would mean that figures like Charlemagne, the great emperor of the Franks, may have been vastly exaggerated or perhaps never existed at all. The words, she said, were fragments in ancient Greek, Latin, and Aramaic, and seemed to repeat a similar message: Jesus of Nazareth. According to Frail's theory, the cloth may have served not only as a burial covering, but also as a rudimentary death certificate. In Roman times, it was common practice to affix or write identifying information directly on burial shrouds, especially for victims of execution. Even so, her discovery has not gained broad acceptance in the scientific community, partly due to the ambiguity of the evidence, and partly because the shroud has become too sacred to be subjected to further, potentially destructive, testing. For the Vatican, the cloth no longer needs to prove its authenticity through science. Its value now lies in the profound faith it continues to inspire. And so, the Shroud of Turin remains suspended between faith and fact, a silent witness whose true origin is still one of Christianity's most enduring mysteries. Imprinted faintly on its surface is the haunting image of a bearded man, his body bearing wounds that perfectly match the biblical accounts of the crucifixion. The marks of thorns on his head, the piercing on his side, and the scourge marks on his back. First recorded officially in France in 1354, the shroud has been the focus of endless reverence, scientific study, and intense controversy. In 1988, the debate seemed to reach a definitive conclusion. 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona conducted radiocarbon dating tests on a small sample of the cloth. The results were shocking. The fabric appeared to date back only to the Middle Ages, somewhere between 1260 and 1390. For many, this was conclusive proof that the shroud was an ingenious medieval forgery, a masterful work of art, but not a 2,000-year-old relic. Not everyone is granted entry, and even those who can only request a few documents at a time, with no browse allowed. While some incredible documents have been made public, such as the 1633 trial, records of Galileo Galilei, or a desperate letter written by Mary, Queen of Scots, just before her execution, these releases are carefully curated. They raise a sobering question. If these few documents alone are enough to reshape our understanding of the past, what truths lie within the millions of pages that remain sealed? Some researchers have likened the archive to a kind of spiritual CIA place, where what is released to the public is merely the tip of the iceberg, while the most profound and perhaps most dangerous pieces are kept permanently locked away. With a collection so vast that some say even the Vatican itself has lost track of everything it contains, the archive remains a symbol of knowledge withheld, a place where the unwritten history of our world lies silent, waiting in the darkness. Though Pope Francis officially renamed it the Vatican Apostolic Archive in 2019 to dispel the cloak of conspiracy, the change in title has done little to erase the lingering question: what secrets is the Vatican still hiding from the world? This is no mere library. It is an immense repository believed to hold over 53 miles of shelving, containing millions of pages of documents that span more than 1,100 years of human history. Within its climate-controlled chambers are papal decrees, private letters from kings and queens, diplomatic correspondence, and the court records of history-altering trials. But many believe it holds far more. Theories persist that the archive contains texts recounting encounters with extraterrestrial beings, records of supernatural miracles that defy explanation, and perhaps even fragments of forgotten scientific knowledge from lost civilizations. The Vatican insists that the archive is not secret in the sense of being hidden, but private, belonging to the Pope. For centuries, one artifact has remained one of the most debated and captivating objects in religious history: the Shroud of Turin. But the story did not end there. In a stunning twist, a researcher from the Vatican archives, Barbara Frail, claimed to have discovered something no one had noticed before: Of all the strange theories ever proposed about our past, one idea stands out for its breathtaking audacity: the suggestion that 300 years of European history never actually happened. Illig offered several arguments to support his outrageous claim. First, he pointed to a discrepancy in the Gregorian calendar. For decades, the Vatican's role during the Second World War has remained one of the most deeply controversial subjects in modern history. At the center of the debate is Pope Pius XII and his public silence as the horrors of the Holocaust unfolded across Europe. According to the documents, these people were not deported to concentration camps when Nazi forces occupied Rome in 1943. Instead, they were secretly hidden in monasteries, convents, and other Catholic institutions throughout the city. But what most people do not realize is that the Bible we hold in our hands today is not the same as it once was. But many scholars believe the reasons run deeper. One theory is that the content of these books contain ideas or accounts that the church wished to suppress. But behind those ancient, hallowed walls, there is a story many believe the church has tried to keep buried for decades: the story of homosexuality within the very heart of the clergy. But what is most striking is his assertion that a culture of hypocrisy has become deeply embedded within the institution. He claims that some of the loudest and most virulent voices condemning homosexuality from the pulpit are the very same men living double lives in private. They denounce the LGBT community in public sermons while engaging in same-sex relationships behind closed doors. The Vatican has never directly denied the statistics presented in the book, but it has offered no formal acknowledgement either. The issue, however, goes deeper than personal identity or hypocrisy. Experts have suggested that forcing individuals to live a double life in an environment as insular and pressured as the Vatican may contribute directly to systemic problems, including the sexual abuse scandals and institutional cover-ups that have plagued the church for decades. When people are not allowed to live truthfully, it can foster a culture where secrecy becomes second nature, and protecting the institution at any cost becomes more important than protecting the vulnerable. As long as the subject remains taboo, this culture of silence will continue to thrive. And when the truth is buried that deeply, it doesn't just damage the church's reputation, it hurts the real people living within its walls, trapped between their faith and their identity. In 2019, French journalist Frédéric Martel published a book that sent shockwaves through the Catholic world. Titled In the Closet of the Vatican, the book was the culmination of a 4-year investigation, drawing on more than 1,500 interviews with cardinals, bishops, priests, and even Vatican security personnel. In it, Martel made a stunning claim that an overwhelming majority, perhaps as high as 80%, of the clergy working within the Vatican are homosexual. Perhaps they complicated the theological narrative or didn't align with the simpler, more streamlined doctrine that religious leaders wanted to promote. Critics of their removal argue that the Apocrypha contains nothing heretical. In fact, they provide a richer understanding of the religious and cultural world of early Judaism and Christianity, bridging the gap between the Old and New Testaments. Another detail often raised in this discussion is the very name of Jesus. In earlier texts, before the Bible was standardized, his name was written as Yesus, which is closer to the original Hebrew name, Yahushua. Over time, both the spelling and the pronunciation were altered to become the Jesus we know today. A shift some believe was part of a broader effort to romanize the image of Christ and make the faith more compatible with Western culture. Regardless of the interpretation, one fact is undeniable: 14 books that were once officially part of the Bible were quietly set aside, leaving many to wonder if a portion of what was considered God's word may have been deliberately aged, hidden, or forgotten. When the Holy Bible was first translated from Latin into English in the early 17th century, the original version, known as the King James Bible, contained 80 distinct books. Yet, by the year 1684, a decision was made to remove 14 of those books from the official Protestant canon. Since then, they have all but vanished from public awareness, becoming a historical footnote that few question. These excluded texts are known collectively as the Apocrypha, a Greek word meaning hidden or kept away. They include books such as Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, Baruch, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees, all of which contain religious narratives, moral teachings, and historical accounts that were once considered an integral part of biblical scripture. The list, which has been verified by Rome's Jewish community and Holocaust memorial organizations, suggests that the Vatican may have been operating a quiet, clandestine rescue network, saving thousands of lives behind the scenes. But this revelation does not erase the controversy. According to some researchers, this help came at a price. They claim that many of these religious institutions only agreed to offer shelter on the condition that the Jewish refugees convert to Catholicism. This raises a troubling question. Was the Vatican acting out of pure mercy, or was it seizing a moment of chaos to further its own religious expansion? Defenders of Pope Pius XII argue that his public silence was a calculated, agonizing decision made to avoid brutal Nazi retaliation against Catholics all across Europe. An open condemnation, they claim, could have led to an even greater bloodbath. To others, that reasoning is unacceptable. To them, silence in the face of absolute evil can never be justified. The new documents have not solved the puzzle. They have only added more layers of complexity. Was the Vatican a bystander, a silent hero, or a morally compromised institution? This remains one of the most sensitive and unresolved chapters in the long and often troubled intersection of religion and war. In the eyes of many scholars and Jewish organizations, the Vatican's failure to openly and forcefully condemn Hitler as genocide was a profound moral failing, one that amounted to complicity. Why? They have asked for over half a century, did the leader of the world, as largest Christian faith, not speak out against the systematic slaughter of millions? The enduring silence from the papal throne during humanity, as Darkest Hour, has left a deep and painful stain on the Church's legacy. However, recently uncovered documents have begun to offer a more complex, and perhaps even more unsettling, perspective. A list containing the names of over 3,000 Jewish individuals was discovered within the archives of Rome's Pontifical Biblical Institute. The Bible is the most sacred and widely read text in Christianity, a book that millions believe to be the divine and unaltered Word of God. So why were they removed? The official explanation often cites questions about their original authorship and historical accuracy. The Vatican is often portrayed as the global seat of Catholic authority, a bastion of solemnity, tradition, and unwavering moral conservatism. According to Martel, many of these individuals live in strict secrecy, concealing their true identities from the public and often from each other. To many, becoming pope seems like the pinnacle of sacred authority, a position both holy and untouchable. But history tells a far more violent and treacherous story. Of the 266 men who have sat on the papal throne, it is estimated that at least 40 have died under mysterious or unusual circumstances. According to the Bible, this was the wooden chest, overlaid with pure gold and topped by two golden cherubim, that housed the stone tablets bearing the 10 Commandments. It was not merely a religious symbol, it was believed to carry the very presence of God, capable of bestowing blessings or unleashing divine wrath upon enemies. Among its most notable exhibits are the Egyptian mummies, displayed in the section dedicated to the Nile civilization. But a recent scientific discovery has cast a shadow of doubt on the authenticity of some of these sacred relics. It turns out that at least a few of the mummies on display at the Vatican are, in fact, fakes. The story began in 2015, when a group of researchers conducted routine X-rays and CT scans on 9 mummies from the museum's collection. But when the images appeared, something was clearly wrong. 2 of the mummies, which had been labeled as the remains of children or animals, did not contain what they were supposed to. Instead, wrapped tightly in ancient linen, were the bones of 2 adults, a man and a woman, dating not to ancient Egypt, but to the Middle Ages. In one case, researchers even discovered a rusted 19th century nail lodged between the bones and the wrappings, seemingly placed there to hold the counterfeit structure together. But around the year 587 BC, when Babylonian forces invaded Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple, the Ark of the Covenant abruptly and completely vanished from all historical records. During this period, owning an Egyptian mummy became a status symbol among wealthy aristocrats and academics. Demand far outpaced supply, and so a black market for fake mummies was born. Unscrupulous antique dealers began wrapping the bones of more recently deceased humans in old linen, sometimes even repurposing fabric from damaged real mummies and selling them as priceless ancient artifacts. These counterfeit relics found their way into museums and institutions across the globe, remaining undetected for decades. The Vatican was no exception. It's important to note that the Vatican did not deliberately deceive the public. Rather, it was itself deceived. In the 19th century, technologies like X-rays or carbon dating simply didn't exist. Acquisitions were made based on trust and the perceived credibility of the seller. Yet, the revelation that fake mummies had been on display in the Holy See's most revered museum raised troubling questions about the authenticity of other historic relics. If forgeries can find their way into a place as sacred and prestigious as the Vatican, then what other secrets might be hiding in plain sight in museums all around the world? Its fate has since become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in religious history. Some scholars believe the Ark was destroyed in the invasion, while others insist it was hidden away and safeguarded. But among the more provocative theories, there are those who suggest that the Ark may now lie deep within the impenetrable vaults of the Vatican. Some were executed, others poisoned, and a few perished in bizarre accidents. One of the main reasons lies in the uncanny similarities between the Ark of the Covenant and the sacred chests used in ancient Egyptian religious rituals. Ceremonial boxes from Egypt, especially those used in processions, were also crafted from wood, coated in gold, equipped with carrying poles, and often adorned with divine beings. Researchers have noted that in the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, archaeologists discovered a ritual chest that closely matches the biblical description of the Ark. Could it be that the ancient Israelites borrowed the concept from Egyptian culture, or was there a deeper connection? If there is any organization in the modern world with the power, resources, and institutional secrecy to preserve such a sacred artifact for thousands of years, it would be the Vatican, of course. The Vatican has never confirmed nor denied having the Ark of the Covenant in its possession, but silence, as so often happens, only fuels the mystery. Many believe that if the Ark still exists, it is being kept in a place of unparalleled security, forever hidden from the world that once revered it as a direct link to the divine. These deaths are a stark reminder that no matter how divine the office may appear, power has always come with a deadly price, especially in a world shaped by politics, betrayal, and revenge. One of the strangest and most grotesque tales in the Church's long history is that of Pope Formosus. He died in the year 896, but for his enemies, that wasn't the end. 9 months after his death, his successor Pope Stephen VI ordered the rotting corpse of Formosus to be exhumed dressed once again in full papal vestments and placed on trial in a macabre proceeding known today as the Cadaver Synod. The corpse was propped up on a throne, and a deacon was appointed to speak on its behalf. Unsurprisingly, the deceased pope was found guilty of perjury and violating canon law. As punishment, the 3 fingers of his right hand, the fingers used to give blessings, were hacked off, and his body was stripped of its robes and cast into the Tiber River. This grotesque episode reveals the sheer depth of internal hatred and political animosity that festered within the medieval Vatican. Alongside these macabre deaths were popes who led lives of such decadence and scandal that they tarnished the image of the Church for centuries. Pope Alexander VI, better known as Rodrigo Borgia, remains one of the most controversial figures in papal history. He held lavish, debaucherous feasts inside the Vatican, maintained multiple mistresses, and shamelessly used his position to elevate his family's wealth and influence. Then there was Pope John XII, who ascended to the papacy when he was only around 18 years old and was said to have turned the sacred Lateran Palace into a house of ill repute. His end was just as scandalous as his life. He died while in the midst of an adulterous affair, with some claiming he was beaten to death by the woman's enraged husband. Others met more unexpected fates. Pope John XXI, a man deeply interested in medicine and science, was killed when the ceiling of his new study collapsed on top of him. These stories reveal that the papal throne has not only been a symbol of divine authority, it has, at times, been a seat of profound human vulnerability, political intrigue, and personal tragedy. The highest office in the Church has come at a steep cost for some, reminding us that many popes, despite their holy titles, were still men driven by ambition and often undone by it. Throughout the history of religion, the Ark of the Covenant has been regarded as one of the most sacred and powerful objects ever crafted. Why is the Vatican so often drawn into this mystery? The Vatican museums are home to one of the largest collections of ancient artifacts in the world, displaying priceless treasures from Roman sculptures to Egyptian relics thousands of years old. These were not authentic Egyptian mummies, they were 19th century fabrications, products of an era when Europe and America were swept up in what historians now call Egyptomania. Within the Vatican, amidst the grand domes and famous frescoes, there's one detail that often goes unnoticed, yet it may hold one of the deepest symbolic secrets of all. It is a massive bronze sculpture of a pine cone, standing nearly 13 feet tall in a courtyard aptly named the Cortile della Pigna, or the Court of the Pine Cone. To most tourists, it is simply a beautiful and ancient piece of Roman art. Tall, pointed, and split at the top, it is known as the mitre. This hat is a significant part of their sacred vestments, yet few people realize that its unique shape can be traced back thousands of years to a religion entirely different from Christianity. It is not just a decorative pattern, it is a wheel with 8 spokes radiating from the center, a design known as the solar wheel. When combined with the 8-spoke solar wheel at its base, these elements form a powerful system of pagan iconography right in the Vatican's front yard. Why would these symbols, once associated with Baal and other sun-worshipping cults, appear in the highest seat of the Christian faith? The answer may again lie in how early Catholicism absorbed indigenous cultures. By preserving symbols familiar to ancient peoples, the Church may have made it easier for them to embrace the new faith, reinterpreting the solar wheel as a symbol of Christ, the light of the world. But others offer a different perspective. They argue that these symbols never truly lost their original meaning, but were instead cloaked in new interpretations, their enduring presence serving as quiet evidence that something from a much older pre-Christian world still lingers unspoken at the very foundation of the Vatican. This is one of the oldest symbols known to humanity, used by countless ancient cultures to revere the sun as the source of all life. Was there something that caught your interest or made you want to share your thoughts? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. We'll see you in the next video. But its prominent placement at the heart of the Vatican has led some researchers to ask a provocative question. Could this well be a tribute to an ancient pagan god? Some believe the 8-spoke wheel in St. Peter's Square may directly represent the symbol of Baal, the powerful Canaanite god of fertility, rain, and thunder. In many pagan traditions, the sun was a divine presence, and the solar wheel symbolized its eternal motion and the unceasing pulse of life. The mitre bears a striking resemblance to the headgear once worn by the ancient priests of Babylon during their worship of the fish god, Dagon. In surviving stone reliefs, Dagon's priests are depicted wearing a hat shaped like the head of a fish, with its open mouth pointing to the sky. When placed on the priest's head, the open-mouthed fish hat looks almost identical to the mitre worn by the Pope today. Dagon was no minor deity. He was a powerful god of agriculture and fertility worship throughout the ancient Near East. He is even mentioned in the Bible as an adversary to the Israelites. When the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant, they placed it in the temple of Dagon, only for his statue to fall twice before it. But upon closer examination, it carries a profound meaning that connects ancient pagan rituals, Eastern mysticism, and the very structure of the human brain. Why would the headpiece of a pagan god, one explicitly identified as a false idol in the Old Testament, become a symbol of authority for the highest leaders of the Christian faith? Some scholars suggest it is the result of cultural syncretism. As Christianity spread, it often adopted and recontextualized familiar pagan symbols to ease the transition. For new converts, the mitre may have been retained but given a new, Christian meaning. Still, others raise deeper questions. Are these symbols merely cultural leftovers? Or do they point to something more? Could it be that remnants of ancient belief systems were never truly erased, but remain embedded in modern rituals, their original meanings hidden from all but a select few? This pine cone statue originally stood near the Pantheon as part of an ancient Roman fountain, close to a temple dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Isis. But what makes the pine cone so special is not just its history, but its uncanny resemblance to a small endocrine organ located near the center of the human brain, the pineal gland. In modern science, the pineal gland is known for regulating sleep by producing melatonin, but in many ancient cultures, it was revered as something far more significant: the third eye, a gateway to higher consciousness, spiritual enlightenment, and a vision beyond the material world. This symbolism is not isolated, it appears across civilizations. In ancient Assyria, deities were depicted holding pine cones in rituals of purification. The staff of the Egyptian god Osiris, the deity of the afterlife, is often shown crowned with a pine cone. In Greek and Roman culture, the god of wine and ecstasy, Dionysus, carried a staff topped with a pine cone, representing life and divine connection. So why would a symbol so deeply intertwined with paganism and ancient spiritual wisdom stand in a place of honor at the very center of the Vatican? Some argue it is merely a historical relic, preserved for its artistic value, but others suspect the Vatican knows far more than it reveals. Perhaps it understands the symbolic importance of the pine cone and its connection to the pineal gland, a piece of forgotten knowledge about human potential and enlightenment, hidden in plain sight. If you have ever seen the Pope or high-ranking bishops during a major ceremony, you have likely noticed the distinctive hat they wear. This history makes its appearance in Catholic ritual all the more puzzling. If you stand in the center of St. Peter's Square and look down at the ground beneath the towering Egyptian obelisk, you will notice a large stone circle embedded in the pavement. The symbolism in the square is layered. The towering obelisk is itself an ancient Egyptian solar symbol, representing a ray of the sun god Ra and masculine vitality. Thank you for staying with us until the end of our journey into the Vatican. As most terrifying secrets